Welcome to David's Ships. This will be the first video in the build series for the 1 in 350 scale HMS Hood model that I'll be constructing. In the cards above you can find a link to a kit introduction video where I show the components that will go into building this model. As is customary with Trumpeter kits, to start this build I will be turning to the very last page of the instruction manual. In the final step of the build, you are given the option to either install a hull plate to build a waterline kit or to install the lower hull. I prefer to do this at the very beginning of the build because trying to glue together these components on a fully constructed kit is, well, madness. This will get damaged. A lot of manhandling is required to put the lower hull onto the upper hull, and all that's going to happen if you've fully constructed the ship at this point is that you are going to cause a lot of damage. So why they put this as the very last step, I don't know, because what should be the very first step is choosing if you are going to build a waterline or full hull kit. In the construction of this model, I'll be making extensive use of the HMS Hood Association's website. The website can be found at hmshood.org.uk. This website has a huge amount of information on the hood, and they've done a lot of research that is going to be incredibly useful in the construction of this kit. For example, in the Hood Today section, they provide detailed reviews and suggestions for many scale model kits of the HMS Hood, including the Trumpeter kit that I'm building. Of particular interest to me are the list of corrections and suggestions that they have provided. This is a fantastic resource. It takes out so much of the legwork of doing your own research to try and figure out how best to build the ship to make it as accurate as possible. This team of experts has done all of that for you. Not only have they told you where it's wrong, but also what you need to do to fix it. So this is going to simplify the construction of this ship considerably. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to implement every single one of their corrections, but I'm going to try and implement as many of them as possible. Certainly the ones that will have the most impact on the ship. When it comes to the hull plating, this is one that I'm not going to do. The reason for that is what they state at the very end here. Regardless of the method, it can be difficult to get perfect edges and shapes. And this is something that I think is more important than if the depth of the plating is too exaggerated. I think the plating would look worse without having perfect edges than it would with having the plating too deep. So based on that rationale, I'm going to rather leave the plating as is and not attempt to reduce the thickness of this plating. The second recommendation for this part of the ship is that the lower hull and the upper hull don't fit together. One is shorter than the other, apparently. When doing a test fit, I didn't really see this as a problem. They look pretty much the same length to me. Maybe when I glue them together, it will show up. But it doesn't really matter. That seam liner is going to have to be filled with putty anyway, so that's going to be fixed no matter what. Now that there is a plan, let's begin construction. I start by placing the upper and lower sections of the hull together and taping them together. Normally I wouldn't do it this way. Normally I'd use Revell Contactor Professional Glue to bond the halves together. I'm going to try a different technique using Tamiya extra thin cement. With extra thin cement you usually apply it by placing the two parts that you're trying to glue together in contact first and then applying the glue to the seam line. I'm not sure if it's going to work so well for large parts like this, which don't necessarily sit so well together, but I'm going to give it a try. Usually I'd use Revell Contactor Professional to glue big parts like this together. That's because it's a thick glue and has the ability to fill gaps quite easily. Also, for a part that's this big, there's more of a chance of parts not fitting together properly. So having a glue that has that ability to fill gaps can be helpful. Also, when it comes to the hull and gluing the sections together, I find that there's almost always a pretty bad seam line. It's going to require a lot of touch-up. So if you're messy with glue and if some does seep out, it doesn't really matter because you're going to have to be doing a lot of sanding and filling with putty anyway. But that's going to be for another video. In this video, I am just concerned with gluing these two halves together. So after taping the two parts together, I then apply extra thin plastic cement to the seam line. Initially, I start from the inside, and I am applying it very liberally. I then move on to apply it from the outside, while trying to keep these two halves together as well as I can. In some models that I've built, the parts of the hull fit together really poorly, and I've had to use weights like books and jugs with water in them to hold them down, to weight them and keep them in contact with each other. Fortunately, on this kit, the parts of the hull are fairly good matches for each other, and tape is sufficient to hold them together while I apply the glue. When applying the glue, I can see it being drawn into the gap, and I suspect this is going to be a problem. I can see that there are, in some cases, a little bit of a gap between the two halves, and extra thin plastic cement is really not the right type of glue to fill a gap. So this is probably going to be a problem, but at this point I'm already started, and to pull the parts apart and then redo it with Revell Contactor Professional is probably just going to cause a whole lot of a mess. So I will persist, and hopefully this will work out. I mean, it is glue. I mean, the worst that can happen is this glue dries and the parts don't bond together, and then I just separate them and glue them properly, but hopefully this works well enough at least. Because of these gaps, I'm going to put on a lot of glue. But this is extra thin plastic cement. It will evaporate and thin out. And as I said before, even though there is a seam line and there's a lot of excess glue here, it really doesn't matter. I will be filling this area with putty and sanding it extensively in the future. After making my way around the entire model, I add on a few extra strips of masking tape to help hold the two halves together. In case you are wondering, the next time I glue a hull together, I will go back to my old method of using Revell Contactor Professional. This has not worked well. The other method is definitely better. But this should be okay in the end. It's just not as good as Revell Contactor. All this glue needs to dry, so this is where I'm going to end this video. In the next video I'm going to work on the deck. This will involve cleaning up the anchor chains and opening up the hose pipe so I can build better openings. The HMS Hood build series is going to be running for quite a long time, so if you're interested in receiving updates, then please subscribe to the channel. Not only will you be informed when I release a video, but it will also help with the growth of the channel. Thanks for watching. Cheers.